Hello, our lovely Girl Awakening listeners. Welcome to 2023. I'm Jo Hendy from the Sacred Sister Project.
I'm Amanda Parker of Mayala Organics.
Come with us as we journey into this week's Awakening episode.
I talk to a spirit. She comes in my dreams. She teaches me lessons.
Good morning, Amanda.
Good morning, Jo.
We're back in the hot seat.
Woo, feels amazing.
It does. We've had a bit of a break. You wouldn't know it, listeners, because we've just kept the potties flowing.
Yep. And Jo went off grid. You did get to see Jo from out back in the sun and the heat and in nature and crocodiles.
Up in Darwin, that was beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah. I miss those
starry nights.
Yeah. But anyway,
we missed you too, but we knew you were
coming back.
Yeah, walking country and sprinkling the love out there.
Yeah, absolutely. We have another incredible, beautiful guest. Actually, this is kind of a newie. What do you call it again? Sorry, I've just had a mental blank. Human design. This has been floating around us for a while, and now we've got someone in the hot seat. So hopefully, this beautiful girl will be able to share a little bit about that at the end. Because I
no doubt there's a trail why.
Of course,
yes.
Yeah. Of course. So today we're lucky enough to have Kirsten Morrison in the hot seat. She alchemises energetics, breathwork, neural reprogramming, that's a little hard to say, and human design together, which allows you to shred everyone else from your cells. How good does that sound?
I want it.
And reveal what's always been there. You. Stripping away the stories of too much-ness, not enough-ness, that take away from your all-ness. Yeah. Oh my God, that's epic. I feel like I'm Oprah reading this out. This is like epic. This is an epic bio.
Yes.
To create an activation of your truth, inspire innovation and new ways of doing things that feel most alive to you. To reconnect you to your own intuition, your guidance system, and your soul truth. Leaving only excitement to go all in your way.
It feels like a treatment just reading the bio. Actually, the words are so alchemizing, energizing.
Yes,
you feel it.
resonating. Yeah. Welcome, Kirsten.
You're welcome.
Thank you for having me. I felt like Oprah being introduced there. I was like, this makes me sound amazing.
Well, maybe we'll go for Amanda Gorman because she's like hot property at the moment and she's a poet and author and just like slightly controversial apparently for some schools, but I think you're next level.
Beautiful bio, and you can just feel and like going through, Amanda and I talked about this earlier, going through your website, you have this beautiful humour that threads through, which is so refreshing.
Yeah. I think that, when it comes to online business, there is a tendency to go on the more serious end of the scale.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what I really enjoy is just bringing who I am to the table. And, my friends, know me as someone who is quite humorous and I do bring a lot of the laughs and, I am laughing all the time. The kookaburra is like my animal and it's no coincidence why. Yeah. But, I do laugh a lot. At one of my first jobs, I got told that I laugh more than a child. So I just do have that kind of jokey nature.
I would love you.
constantly laughing at myself as well. So I feel like I wanted to weave that into what I do.
Yeah.
And, I think that sometimes the more humorous side of ourselves can almost be more of a risk than the serious side sometimes online.
I agree. Especially when we're talking in this area, more the holistic area. There's been this kind of thread, for a long time where you have to be a certain way or look a certain way or talk a certain way. It's always quiet and reserved.
Yes.
And we're realising now, no. It's more about bringing more of you to the table.
100%. And even, I love infusing myself in every aspect, even down to the music that I use.
Yeah.
The music that I use is very different to anyone else, in the personal development space, especially in like the breathwork space. Yeah. I'm using like club tracks and dance music and stuff rather than, the more, bass kind of sounds and the drumming and things like that. A lot of mine is very, fun. Like even my membership, one of the sort of theme song that I have for my membership, it's actually like one of my favorite songs from when I was in my early 20s partying and like dancing on podiums. Yeah. So I love to just infuse those elements to kind of, it's all in my design obviously as well, but I love to infuse those elements to basically say like, you can bring all of you to the table no matter what that looks like. And there's so many multi-layered ways of doing that. Yeah. But, whether that's the visuals, the music that you're using, everything has an intentionality for me that, I'm infusing what I love and enjoy and represents me, not what is industry standard.
Love it.
Yeah.
Your vibe attracts your tribe.
Yes.
Love it.
And we're going to go straight from there into asking you, Kirsten, how did your awakening begin?
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
This is
Was it on a podium?
buckle in. Yes, probably. That probably was like where the seeds started to be planted. No, I think for me, the tipping point was really my dad passing away. He passed away in 2014 after struggling for 16 years. He had a stroke in 2000, and it was just a slow deterioration from there. And I think that for me, after he passed, it was really this kind of, awakening to be like, wow, like life is not guaranteed.
Yeah.
And it was this real permission slip for me, because although he had been sick for a long time, it still kind of came as a shock, because we had gotten so used to him pulling through and pulling through and pulling through. But also I think what was challenging for me to see, and the biggest gift that I got out of his life was that, he really didn't get to enjoy his life the way that he should have, because he was from the school of thought that you build it and then you enjoy it when you retire. But, because of, the series of events that happened after he got sick, he didn't get to retire and he didn't get to enjoy that part of his life. So for me, it was this awakening of like, okay, life is fine, but like, am I actually really living it for me? And so one of the things that I had always wanted to do was to spend an extended period of time in America. When I was 7, I watched 90210 and just thought that was like the be all and end all of everything. I was like envisioning myself living there, driving down the palm lined streets, and that was where all my problems would just disappear and life would make sense. And I'd been there a few times, I'd been on a few trips before, but one of the things that I really wanted to do was try and move there. And so it took me a few years from that point to kind of build myself up in the courage to give that a go, because I think as well, one of the things with that trip was because it was so important to me. I thought to myself, like, if this doesn't work, what the fuck am I going to do?
So much expectation. So much expectation on that one thing.
Totally, because I was like, if this doesn't work and I can't live there, like, I felt like my life was going to be over. So it was better to like delay that dream rather than attempt it. And I think that that's something that seeps across so many different areas of life, right? And so I eventually plucked up the courage to do it, because I had a beautiful friend who kind of called me forward, and she said, you may as well go, because you've got your life on hold here. You're not actually living your life, because you're waiting just in case you get to go. But she's like, you're not going. So I booked the trip.
Love that friend.
Yes.
We all need a friend like that.
Absolutely.
And so I booked the trip.
How old are you?
Sorry. So by this stage, so my dad passed when I was 27. By this stage, I was 32.
Okay.
So it was a few years that it kind of took me to move through that process and step into that.
Of course.
And when I did finally go, it was so interesting. I think, we always get what we need, not what we want.
Yeah.
And I got over there, and I really was so fortunate and blessed to have this beautiful dichotomy of experiences there, where all of my friends over there are in the music industry, they're in the fashion industry, like they're living their purpose. And that was something that had always plagued me in my 20s, was I didn't feel like I had a sense of purpose. And I tried so many different hats on, I tried so many different things, but nothing had quite clicked for me. And so I was so blessed to see my friends living their purpose every day, and just the energy that they had, especially, being expats, they were all Australian, but they've put themselves in a position to be like, I'm the best, I deserve to be here. And they were knocking on any door that was required to put them in the rooms they needed to be in
themselves.
And so, and the American culture as well is so different from the Australian one. It's like, talk about your big dreams, like tell everyone. And so it was, this real immersive experience into like, wow, this is what it looks like when you back yourself. And I had this huge awareness piece of, I don't back myself. And I realized that even if the purpose came and smacked me in the face, I didn't actually believe in myself to make it happen. And so that kind of came about because I realized that in order to stay, I was going to have to be someone to knock on any door and put myself in any room to argue why I needed to be there above anyone else. And I was like, I can't do that. I realized that I couldn't do that. And so that was one half of the experience. And the other half was I had a beautiful friend who was working down on Skid Row and doing a lot of work with the homeless. And so I really got the full glittery, high red carpet LA experience. And then also talking to people who were living on the streets. And I had this real awareness of like, wow, there's so much impact that is required in the world, and there's so much that I could be doing, and there's so much help to be created. And I kind of started to get this little simmering seed of like, oh, I want to do something like that where I'm helping people, but I didn't quite know what that looked like. But all I knew was that in order to stay there, I would have had to have gotten a job in events. So that would have been like celebrity events was kind of the opportunity that I'd received to stay. And whilst that would have been, you know, early 20-year-old me, dancing on podium with absolute dream to be doing celebrity events, for me at that stage, I was like, okay, this is a real fork in the road moment. I can either choose the path that I've been on, or I can follow this seed of curiosity and see where that takes me. But also, I realized I need to go home and do some work on myself. Like, I realized I'm like, it doesn't matter when the clarity lands. If I'm not the vehicle to facilitate that, it's not going to happen.
Wow.
So I made the commitment. I made the commitment. This was in the start of 2017. I made the commitment to go home and just go all in on becoming the person that I knew was deep down there somewhere. And so I just threw myself into personal development in 2017 and said yes to all the things that I'd been saying no to. You know, there were so many things that I'd been like, oh yeah, maybe next time it comes around, that I'd been eyeing off. And I just said yes to it all. And it was actually in my first in-person workshop that I had this huge breakthrough of my story of not being good enough, which was actually what had been holding me back all along. And
sorry, can I just ask a question in there? You say my story of not being good enough. Can you just explain to the listeners what that means to you? Like your story. So.
Well, this is when I realized it was a story at the workshop, was because up until then I truly believed that. I didn't believe I had I didn't have any talents, I didn't have any skills, I didn't have anything, you know, worthwhile. It was never going to happen for me. All of these things that I had believed about myself. And that was the first fracture in that story where I was like, wow, this is actually not my truth. This is actually just a compounded series of beliefs that I've taken on as my story. And so that was that first, I was like, wow. And so much shifted because there were so many somatic practices in there that I'd never done, and so much that had been weighing me down shifted. And it was a huge eye-opening transformational moment, and I actually thought it was like a seminar. I thought I was just going to sit there and take notes. I had no idea what I was walking into. I had no idea what I was walking into, and so that was I don't think I would have gone if I had known what I was doing.
Middle of the room,
literally. And because I had gone by myself as well, because I was like, it's okay, I'm just at the back taking notes. But what happened in that weekend, I was like, wow, if this story that I've had my whole life can shift in start to shift in 2 days, whatever just happened in this room, I want to be a part of it. I want to bring that to other people.
I love that word fractured that you use. That's such a great word because you've literally broken into something and out of something.
Crack the shell.
It's powerful.
And so, you know, I got my, you know, coaching diploma, did my NLP, I discovered breathwork, I got my breathwork qualifications, and that sort of led me down the path of, you know, starting my business and juggling that full time with that stage I was an event manager, so I was juggling a bit of both. And then I went full time in my business at the start of 2020, like literally February 2020, as this like, have you heard about? And so that was really a baptism by fire, but actually that led me to human design, which my whole world kind of centers around now in my life and business, because I had been really, you know, struggling to find a way of business that really worked for me. And I didn't understand why I was following all of the things to the letter and checkbox, and, you know, everything that everyone said would work wasn't working for me. And so I got a human design reading, and it gave me so much affirmation of why it wasn't working. It was because it literally was not for my design. And so that permission slip and then starting to experiment with my design was when things really started to pick up. But not only that, I think that when I had come home from America, I thought that year I had found myself. I thought that was my awakening, but I actually think that human design was that last little piece of the puzzle to bring that all together of that journey.
Wow. Aha moment.
Yeah.
Because when, like, just reflecting on like the community of people you went and lived with in the States, like, you know, they sound like a really together bunch of people, and yet the reflection of yourself was not seeing that at all. And it's what we often do, isn't it? We have these amazing experiences, tribe, community, and we don't see ourselves as being on that same wavelength.
Oh, totally. And, you know, it's interesting because, you know, I had varying success, and even actually now looking back with kinder eyes, you know, I look back at some of the things that I did in that time and I was like, why did I think I wasn't doing well or doing things? Like, it just, like, it doesn't make any sense now that I look back at it and go down, you know, memory lane. You know, there were so many things that I had done, and, you know, people were reflecting to me like, you know, you're really great at this, you're really great at this, but I just couldn't see it. Yeah. And so I think it actually took that inner work for me to actually be able to see myself and what I was capable of as well. Absolutely, absolutely. So I want to go back to that workshop. The one that
fractured.
That's huge. Like, there's so much in that, you know, in itself that we could, you know, kind of pull apart. So you realize that you were running a story.
Totally.
Yeah.
It was so fascinating. You know, it was really the first time that I realized it actually wasn't true. Yeah. It had just been because of the experiences I'd had in my younger life that compounded over adulthood. Yeah. And to recognize that as not truth, I realized that there was something that could be done about that belief. Yeah. And also the freedom in escaping from that story, because the story can lock us in. Oh, totally. Yeah. And it's so fascinating as well because, you know, at the end of that workshop, so many of the people that had been in my small group were saying to me, like, you feel and look like a completely different person because so much weight had been liberated from my body, like, you know, and even, you know, now, like years later, you know, from doing breathwork and a lot of somatic stuff, like my posture has changed, my voice has changed, the way I hold myself, you know, so many things has shifted about myself and my energy and the way that I present myself to the world because of the slow unraveling of all of these stories that I had. I want to ask somatic. Can you explain what that is? So somatic is anything where we're working with the body. So, you know, we can do sort of mindset work where we're, you know, doing the affirmations or the reprogramming, but then somatic is anything we do with the body. So for me, that's breath work, different movement practices, things where you're kind of releasing stored emotion and experience from the body, because our body is a living library of experiences. Even when the mind gets really adept at forgetting things, the body remembers. So it really is important to do both. Look at both when you're doing that work. I don't think we put enough emphasis, or we don't realize or understand yet how powerful our body is. Totally. And how it stores memories and everything. And even the memories and experiences we store over time can also create physical manifestations. So it is really important to look at it from that body aspect, because, you know, I've seen some profound things working with people on that body level in the breathwork space, you know, things where they've had, you know, a hip pain that's been there for years just disappears in one session. Like so many different things that it's actually an emotional root that's creating that physical manifestation. So, you know, I didn't even realize, but after I'd done my first breathwork training, which was 7 days of breathwork, there was a friend of mine that said to me, you know, oh, the quiver in your voice is gone. I said, I didn't even know I had one. But I had this like nervous shake in my voice when I would speak. Wow. So, you know, again, that was just that not enoughness. That where I had, you know, even like I said, my posture, because I had actually been like hunching over to, you know, protect myself and my heart and shrink down small to avoid being seen. So there was so much, but that was really the first little crack in the eggshell, as you said.
And I love, because when you were saying before about the story and like how we don't realise that we're living our story, it's usually the body that fractures or cracks when we think we're living how we're supposed to, like what our story feels right. It's usually our body that cracks, like those illnesses and things like the pains in the hips and those scenarios that force you to look at addressing self or loving self in a different way or making changes.
100%.
And, whatever path we go down can be quite a huge opportunity or suffocation of things. And, you know, I noticed something like a couple of the most common places that I see women hold tension are, you know, the jaw area, so like clenching, grinding, and also our shoulders, you know, because that's connected to, you know, speaking our truth and setting boundaries, but also we hold so much stress and tension there because it's all matters of the heart and our worth and our value. Wow. So, you know, it's so fascinating to see what
is created from releasing that from the body.
Yeah.
Even we don't even have to have a mental narrative around it. We don't even have to engage with why we're having a release in that space. But, you know, what is created from that is profound.
And I can feel where even noticing and seeing your story and it's just one kind of story, because we have many stories.
Yes.
Can then open you up or open anyone up to go, wow, where else am I holding a belief?
Yeah.
Or a pattern that's been sitting in me forever.
Totally.
Yeah. And then releasing that then opens the body up as well.
Yeah.
And, you know, sometimes, I mean, we've had many women sit in the chair that their awakening has began by an illness.
Mm.
So you're lucky just hearing your story. You didn't have to get there to realise that. But so many women get to the stage where, you know, it can be as big as breast cancer or another form of cancer.
Car accidents.
Where they're holding a story, which is then, you know, refusing to budge, then it manifests somewhere in the body.
Well, interestingly enough, I did actually have a benign tumour cut out of my vocal cords. Wow. That was prior to America. So that was in between my dad passing and that had actually delayed my America trip. Wow. That was a pure fluke that was even found. I actually had an MRI of the head because I was getting migraines and they accidentally picked it up on the scan. Wow. So I got it removed before it went malignant, which apparently in that area, by the time they normally find them, they are. So I was actually very fortunate in that space. But I felt intuitively at the time that was actually from, you know, a manifestation of my voice being so repressed for so long, you know. And I'm, you know, a manifestor in human design. That's literally my superpower is my voice. Yes. And I had it on lockdown. Wow. So, you know, I think, you know, for me that was also a wake-up call because I could have lost my voice from that surgery. And so, you know, that was one of the things that had kind of started to simmer away, is like, I'm not going to take my voice for granted anymore.
Yeah. So was that part of the story that you were running, that you couldn't speak up, or there wasn't a safe place to speak up?
No, I think it was just because I didn't believe in myself. So it was like I didn't believe that my words had value. So it wasn't that there wasn't a safe space. It was just that it was like, well, I didn't see the value in what I was saying, so I didn't say it. And
it's so wild because you speak so beautifully. And even the communication in words is so beautiful. Like it's so connecting. It's so connecting. Yeah. It makes sense now when you go, oh, okay, purpose, and you know the story I've been running.
Yeah. And also it's interesting because, you know, when I think the earliest thing that I ever wanted to be was a writer, and that was, you know, even when I was 3, I was writing books in my, you know, room, and they obviously were not legible at all, but colourful. There was some chicken drawings and stuff. But you know, that was something that I always loved using my voice. You know, and then I think it was only really in my, you know, late teens, 20s that I really started to lose a lot of faith in that and hold it back a lot. So it's, you know, still I think a journey now, even still reclaiming aspects of that, and it's an evolving piece to, you know, return home to something that was once easy for me.
Do you think, like, in that time, like in your teens and 20s, because that's, you know, when we're stepping out into the world more and more, and adulthood, if you want to use that word, is beckoning us to expand, but there's so much around peer groups and 100%. What are you going to do when you grow up, and all that kind of scenario, in the, you know, facing you as well.
Totally. And I think for me as well, you know, my dad, you know, he got sick when I was 15, and so that was, you know, I think and also I think because so much focus then went to, you know, because my parents ran a business together, and then, you know, there was a lot of, you know, stress around that because he was, you know, in the hospital for a year, and he was the primary person to really run that business and do the jobs and different things. So there was so much stress and pressure, you know, around that time when I was sort of finishing school and really finding myself. But also I think because that trickled on, you know, through right until my late 20s, I think that actually that deviation from myself actually came from a level of escapism. You know, I think I was like, well, you know, I'm just going to get drunk and forget it ever happened, you know, and it was like really like I threw myself into partying, and that's really where I got my significance, was around peer groups and, you know, partying and going out and outfits and all the things that weren't actually really serving me at all.
Well,
but they were,
it
was just like, you know, when I'm out at a club and I'm on the podium, nothing matters.
Yeah.
So
you're having the time
your company and
exactly. And, you know, I lived over in the UK for a while, and that was a real level of escapism because I literally got like as far away as I could. And so, you know, that was a real element for me that, you know, obviously I now see value in that part of my journey too. Yeah. But, you know, I think that was also a big sidestep that took me off track from who I was as well.
But sometimes too, there's two elements there. The one of like at that age, you know, it is about gathering experiences, and it is about, you know, experimenting, I guess, you know, in friendship groups and, you know, social life and things. And then there's also that part of, you know, as a young person, seeing someone you love being unwell, or at any time, anyone who's journeyed with someone in the family who's been slowly dying, basically, it's not an easy path, is it? And sometimes you just need to be away.
I just didn't want that responsibility. You know, I just wanted to be free and liberated from the responsibility of all of that and the weight of that. So that was the path I chose. But it's interesting because, you know, in human design, I'm a profile 6-line profile, and the 6-line profiles live their life in 3 distinct phases. So the first 30
have to explain more.
But the first 30 years is all trial and error. So I absolutely max the trial and error out in that first 30 years. So
I didn't know there was maybe that's
I keep getting that though. When you're talking about that, I keep going, no, that there was no mistake.
No.
You were absolutely supposed to have that experience.
And you know, I probably wouldn't do it any different even if I could, because, you know, basically, you know, for the 6 lines, our first 30 years, like especially that, you know, those 20 years, it's really about just throwing yourself into experience. And I think that if I had my time over, all I would do is probably enjoy it more. And I'd be like, well, you know, I'm a late bloomer. I'm just going to really like max this out. I'm not going to worry about it. But, you know, then the phase that I'm in now is we actually go into a different phase called on the roof, where we gain a different perspective and we start to heal from the first 30 years. We gather tools that are ultimately going to support us in our final phase, which is actually 50 plus. And that's actually where we come into our full stride and really alchemize the lived experiential wisdom with the fresh perspective that we got in the second phase. Beautiful. And we blend those together, and that's actually, I call it our Oprah moment. So it's so funny when you said, I feel like Oprah ran this out, I'm like, I'm having my Oprah moment already. So yeah, that's so that is actually also reassuring, because like it actually gave me that piece of like, okay, all of that was for a purpose. And I learned so much that has, you know, obviously informed the foundation of what I do now. And you know, I might not have found this path if I didn't have all of those experiences. So
absolutely. And that's, you know, that whole thing now that we talked about at the very beginning, where, you know, you're Kirsten who's fun, humorous. It's almost like that party side. There's a part of you that's still there.
Oh yeah,
she's
like
just a lot wiser.
Totally. Like I said, you know, the music she loved is still in the business.
I love that.
And transmuting it into a space of healing. And infusing people with that energy.
Totally. Yeah.
And I think that's what, you know, a lot of our listeners love hearing, that you don't have to change anything about you. Yeah. It's just about gathering all the pieces that you love, that bring you joy and bliss. You're still integral to yourself. And you're not harming anyone. Yeah. But hey, don't throw out the joy. Like, you know, bring that along. Yeah. The laughter, the humour, all of that.
And, you know, I think the humour actually, you know, I think it was also at points a coping mechanism, because I was like, I have to laugh. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm not going to be well. So, you know, I think that, you know, I learned to laugh and find the joy in situations, you know, through those hard times. And I think that has also given me a level of resilience now that I'm so grateful for too.
Absolutely. I love that.
Yeah. What I'm here, before we move on to the next question, is with the human design, like the I don't know, the phases that you were talking about is so much in line with the Saturn journey through the astrology chart, like, you know, the 7-year cycle, and Saturn representing father in the chart as well, which at 27 your father passing, and literally it's like 7, 14, 21, 28, 29, and 55 is like, you know, that literally that phase of the Saturn return where exactly as you described it, you know, the wisdom of your journey so far is, you know, you fully launch into that space of
how exciting,
all dimensions of self. It's very, very amazing.
It's beautiful. I can
Mm.
feel that, like, I don't know where I'm at in that phase. I'm somewhere. Feels very much like what you've been talking around the certainty, because I think you become really certain in who you are, and it's okay.
Totally.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's so interesting, you know, when I think back to, you know, the pressure I put on myself in my 20s to figure it out, you know, that's why I said I think I would have just given myself the advice, like, just go harder into enjoying yourself, because I think that, you know, we have this weird thing in society where we think we're all going to turn into a pumpkin at 30. And, you know, that's really when I feel like my life began in so many aspects as well. So, you know, for me, it just seems to keep getting better each year, because, like you said, I do develop more of a trust in myself and more a belief in myself, and you do start to really have that solidity in who you are and the journey you're taking. And I think now, you know, even understanding that, you know, I will probably hit my, you know, biggest bloom 50 plus, I'm like, well, great, like, you know, that kind of gives me so much to look forward to as well. And, you know, I think there's so many great examples of 6-line profiles that are really having their moment at this stage in their final phase. We've got like J-Lo, Jennifer Coolidge, Shania Twain, like all of these beautiful, Pamela Anderson, who are having this like big resurgence of like really stepping into their power. And I think that that's just such a great, you know, guide and, you know, reassurance for me that there's so much still to look forward to.
And bringing through such genuine spunkiness.
Yes.
You know, all of those women you mentioned, you know, it's so cool.
Love that.
So many cultures as well, like, value women in that age as well. I think the French say you're not a true woman until you're in your 50, you know,
I'm
50,
going to move to
like,
France.
I
love croissants as well. That's great.
You know, the wise women that, you know, that spunky phase of life. Yeah. Which, you know, a lot of in our
you know, we talk about no fucks given.
Yeah.
Like that phase, you know, you get into that phase where it's like you really don't give a fuck about. No. I mean, you do. You care.
Absolutely.
That doesn't go out the window.
Like not holding back on yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. Not calling yourself out, backing yourself as, you know, what is one of the big...
Yeah. No, absolutely. I love that. And just on that experience thing, I say to my kids who are all adults now, you know, you're here on this planet to have a human experience. Yeah. Go for it. You know, like literally do it all. But look after the people around you, look after yourself, but have that full experience. You know, don't hold back.
And, you know, I definitely think that, you know, I burnt the candle at both ends and I have no regrets. No. I definitely can't say, like, you know, oh God, like I need to have another, like, you know, resurgence when I'm 40 and go and I'm like, I've done that and that chapter was successfully done and now we're in a new phase.
Yeah, you're a beautiful example of having a full human experience. Yeah. It's like feeling, seeing, touching all the contrast.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely never short of a story. Yeah. So, like, you know, always, or like, no matter what the example is, I have a story to go with it. Like, and I actually had I think a couple of years ago, I had a psychic reading, and when she tuned in, she said, I actually wasn't sure if this was all one person when I first started, but it is. And I was like, yep, that sounds about right. Yeah.
You've got the right soul.
Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool.
That's beautiful. And how gorgeous is that kaleidoscope of colour and personality. Yeah.
That's beautiful. We are going to jump on to the next question, but I think it's fitting for where we're at. So when did you first notice, and it's probably, I know that you said that everything kind of opened up for you around the 2020. When did you first notice a shift in your thoughts about the world? Not just about what was going on for you, but outside the world. And I know COVID hit right when you, and I know a lot of people had massive shifts.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me it was a lot earlier than that. You know, I think even when I think back to, you know, after my dad passed, I started reading personal development books and stuff. So I'd started kind of, you know, shifting my perspective around then. But I really do think it was actually in the conversations with the houseless in LA. I think that was when my world really shifted, because the conversations that I had was so real. But I think also what was so profound about those conversations was that could literally happen to any of us. You know, I think that there's so many preconceived notions of how people end up on the streets. And, you know, one conversation, for example, was, you know, this guy who had, you know, moved from New York to LA for a job. He ended up in a car accident in his first week and ended up having such a high hospital bill that he ended up on the streets.
Wow.
And so, you know, that was just a couple of events that led to that. Yeah. And, you know, yes, of course, it's obviously very sad that he doesn't have the support as well from family and friends, you know, and obviously they're all across the other side of the country as well. Yeah. And he kind of explained that he kind of burned his bridges when he moved out there. Yeah. And, you know, he thought, oh, I've got a big job now, I'm going to leave. And, you know, but, you know, that could literally happen to any of us. Yeah. And I think that the conversations that I had there really made me look at life differently, made me look at, you know, how we can support each other differently, the impact that I could have differently. And, you know, like I said, just how easy it is to go from one reality to another. Yeah. And, you know, it did make me kind of see things in a way of like, you know, well, how can we resolve some of these problems in society so this doesn't happen? You know, there's so many band-aid solutions, and obviously the system is in some way set up for us to fail and to keep people in certain positions. And, you know, that kind of lit a fire in me to be like, you know, I want to make a difference in some capacity. So that was definitely when my world shifted for sure. That was a really huge shift in consciousness for myself.
Understandably. So huge. I mean, because even the example, the story that you shared, the person's story you shared, I mean, the hospital that helped him in the accident was actually also the catalyst for his demise. Yeah. I mean, it's so ironically ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah. And I, you know, remember reading about, there was a phase there, I think, I don't know, where it was a hot storyline where women in the States in particular experiencing divorces, like all they had was their wardrobe in their car. Yeah. And they were living in their cars.
Well, the highest growing demographic of homelessness in Australia is women over 55. Yes. And so, you know, this is where you really do see how much the system isn't really set up to support us, and so many people fall between the cracks. And I think one of the most interesting things that I heard in a conversation with someone who was homeless in LA was, you know, he said, when you walk down the street and you smile at people, people smile back. When I walk down the street and smile at people, they cross the street. Yeah. And, you know, he was like, it doesn't even matter about giving the money and all these things that people think. He's like, just acknowledge me. And so I think that, you know, really recognizing that, you know, we are all human, and, you know, so many people do fall below the line of humanness and are not treated as humans. So, you know, I think that, you know, it's interesting, and sometimes I wonder, I'm like, you know, when I get to my, you know, final phase in my 50s, I'm like, oh, what will I actually be doing? Will I be like breaking the wheel, like, you know, breaking the system down? Like, I don't know where it'll take me, but
it's wild because it's like, you know, outside of that, that can be a story, you know, just in itself, and that's the reality of the world that's happening. But then there's another world that's trying to push in, you know, around this 5D consciousness, you know, around where we're all connected, and, you know, there should be no poor and no rich, and we should be looking after each other. And, you know, that reality is trying to come in. It's like,
but I also think one thing that I've noticed recently is that that reality that's trying to come in are really fucking tired right now. Yes. Yeah. And like everyone's really exhausted in the, you know, the spiritual space, the wellness space, the personal development space. And, you know, what I'm witnessing is so many like entrepreneurs who stepped into this space to make an impact getting so exhausted they want to leave the room. Yeah. And I'm like, if you leave the room, like, we need you. And so, you know, I think that this is where, you know, I'm really noticing that there is a bit of a shift and a bit of a wavering in the energy with the people who are stepping in trying to make a difference, because we've been holding the space and holding the light, and now it's like, okay, but, you know, things are getting really uncomfortable, they're getting really challenging. I don't know how much more I can hold this for. And so, you know, that also makes me, you know, want to go even harder, because I'm like, you know, I want to make sure that people stay in the room, because, you know, this is really needed. Like, if we're not in those rooms, like, what is that going to do for the people that actually really need this support? It's going to have such a huge knock-on effect.
Absolutely. Well, the crash will be accelerated, and it's going to be an even bigger job pulling things back up the hill. Yeah. And the timing of, you know, when you said about launching your business that you are now in 2020, it was such a powerful time for so many people walking into that year. Yeah. It's almost like okay, you were being called into the room at that time because of what was about to happen. It's so many people got pulled in to hold that space.
Yeah. Well, the funny part was I was already, like I said, I was already juggling for like 2 years prior to that with like, I was doing full-time biz and dabbling in the work, and then I was doing part-time biz and part-time work, and I had actually been waiting for the perfect time, and I actually got basically an ultimatum at the end of 2019 of like, you either come back full-time or you leave, because we actually need you here full-time. I was actually a manager. I really shouldn't have never been part-time anyway. But I had a really great boss who had given me that flexibility, but it was like the business had gotten to the point where that wasn't sustainable. And so I made the decision of like, okay, well, it's now or never.
Yeah.
And so I took that leap. But that was actually, I think it was like the last day in February that was my last day. And I was like,
God, 2020 was like...
I know. And I was like, wow, I've literally waited like 2 years for the perfect time to jump into this. And I could not have picked a more chaotic time.
I totally knew that you were all over it.
Yeah.
It was the perfect time for you.
But that was really fucking stressful, because I was like, everyone's like pandemic pivoting, and I'm like, wait, pivoting? I'm like, I haven't even figured out how to just be straight. I'm like, I can't even go in a straight line. How am I supposed to now pivot? So that was, really like the first couple of months of that was really intense, because all of my income that I had pre-planned was actually all in person. All of my revenue was in-person breathwork sessions. And when that got stripped away, I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, what am I going to do now?
Yeah.
And actually, my mentor said the other day, she was like, how many... she's like, how many... I can't remember what the word she used was, but she was talking about like basically how many rooms, how many breakdowns, how many, external experiences can your art survive? Yeah. And, I think that she was like saying, that what we've been through and what we're still transitioning through, and, things that are to come, like there's going to be so many different things that are going to shake us. Yeah. But it's like, how strong are you in your craft and who you are? Because that's what's going to allow you to stay in the room.
Yeah. Yeah. I absolutely feel that 100%. It's definitely an internal awakening for most people to know that when and if something did happen, that you already know. You just know inside you're certain enough to go, I can handle this, I can handle anything. Yeah. Yeah.
And committing to yourself in that way as had a conversation with the rock down the end of the beach this morning.
Yeah.
And thank you for your strength.
Yes.
I see that strength in myself.
Yeah.
I love that.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Yeah. Absolutely. So moving forward. What kind of things were happening to you or around you that as part of the awakening? Did you see, like, we talk about manifesting, like, people learning that they can actually manifest things now, create things and all of that. What type of things were happening around you or to you or for you when all this was happening?
I actually think that it's like probably not a fun or sexy answer, but I think that actually for me it was less about, manifesting and all these positive things happening. I think actually for me it's really been an initiation into self-responsibility. And I think that has come in so many different forms, but even say for example, like I said, when I recognized that story wasn't true, and it's like, okay, well, what are you going to do about that? And then when I started saying yes to the experiences that year that I had been putting off I still had the same excuses. I was still like, I don't have the money, I don't have the time. I still had all the same excuses, but it's like, okay, but what are you going to do differently now? And when obviously I took the leap into my business, and then it was like, okay, but what are you going to do now? And it was like, how are you going to find a solution for yourself in this moment? It was that self-responsibility. As sort of COVID came to an end, I moved into a new house that was double the rent with my partner at the time, and then he left 3 months after we moved in.
Nice.
And then I was like, okay. And then I was like, I had already been a little bit like, oh, okay, this is a bit of a stretch. We're going to have to like dig in and find a new way of being to accommodate this. And then I'm like, oh, and now I'm solely responsible for this. Now I'm really going to have to dig. And so there has just been so many points, I think, over the last few years where it's actually my lesson in my awakening has actually been like, how can I be fully responsible for myself and actually not be so reliant on so many external things that I had used as a safety net up until that point, including excuses, help and nourishment from family and different, elements that I'd really used as a crutch. And so all of that, avoidance that I had done, like I said, about responsibility in my 20s, I think has really like caught up with me. And it has actually, I feel like my business and this journey has been an initiation into womanhood.
Yeah.
And self-responsibility, and actually, you know, believing in myself to be resourceful in a whole different light.
Yeah. It's almost like I'm hearing
beautiful.
it's like a step into that divine feminine, like the true essence of that.
Yeah.
You know, where you're in control of you.
Yeah.
No one else.
Holding the sword.
Totally. And also, I think this year has actually been a different layer to the journey of that, where it's not so much boss babe self-reliance, which I think I had used. You know, I'd gone kind of like, you know, hyper independence, only child on it, and kind of figured things out. And then this year has been, you know, a different kind of softening into, yes, being self-responsible, but not being hyper masculine in that holding of myself as well. And actually opening myself up to different layers of emotional support and, you know, different dynamics with friendships and, you know, just, being in a different receivership and a different season this year, which has not been easy. I think, you know, the journey that I've had this year has really been a huge awareness of all of the fragmented ways that I've been relating with the masculine, including money, business structures, myself, the divine, like so many different things that have really been kind of cracking me down this year to operate in a different way.
It's a beautiful balancing act, isn't it? It's like finding, and I love that the word that you chose, that word softness, because it's really about that balancing of all of those things in the most beautiful, softest way that you can do it. And it's subtle. Some of the shifts are very subtle.
And flow.
But massive, flow, isn't it?
Yeah. And when you were describing before about, when we were talking before about your humour at the beginning, and not being traditional, like, businesswoman, and, you know, that's something, again, another story where as women we strive to be corporate, we strive to be, you know, in suits or, you know, achieving on a level that may be perfect for us, but isn't perfect for everyone, but yet it's a uniformity that seems to be, if you're doing it, this is what it looks like. Totally. And but yet the essence of what you're just describing, that comfort of sitting in your birthright of the divine feminine and embracing the masculine as it serves you, that is really part of the global thing at the moment, the shift that's happening on every level, politics, you know, homelessness, families, but how we're feeling it ourselves is kind of electric almost, isn't it, when you feel that softening and ability to receive, you know, because the receiving, like, holy shit, how hard is it to receive?
Especially when you're trying to be that boss babe.
Totally.
It's like
the first thing that popped to mind was I just had this memory of me when I was in event management, and I had gone to pick up a floral arrangement for an event, and it was in these big heavy glass vases that I was carrying down the street in heels, and this guy looking hot, but this guy was like, "Can I help you?" I was like, "Nope, I'm fine, thank you."
I'm dying, but no, thank you.
I'm absolutely fine. Do not even
don't hit on me.
But you know, there's so many different ways. But I think for me, even like just receiving provision from, you know, the business structures, you know, strategy and structure has been something that I've always rebelled against, especially I think, you know, once I found out I was a manifestor in human design, I was like, fuck it, I don't need a strategy. And it's like, I just kind of like took that on and like used it to like double down on like rejecting these masculine elements that actually help my creativity. So that's where I've sort of been rebuilding my relationship with different things this year, which has been, you know, again, a whole new interesting layer to explore. And, you know, one that I didn't realize was going to be quite so healing, but also quite so deep. And, you know, it is, it's been a really interesting year, this one.
That's so perfect, because the next question is, have you decided to change anything?
As a result of this year, or just
you know,
in general?
Throughout you waking up, finding all these pieces that you've found and juggling and balancing and all of those things, what have you had to change?
Oh my God, everything. Literally everything, you know. From the time that first sort of happened, you know, I had to change every single way that that's all good. Yes, that's it. Every single way that I'd been relating with myself, I had to change the relationship that I had with my excuses. I had to change the relationship, especially family dynamics, huge shifts there. Boundaries were set.
That's probably one of the hardest things too, isn't it? Because our family have us, not all families, but, a lot of the time have us in a box. And, it's like, please stay that way, because if you change, that means something's got to change for me. And I can't handle that right now. So just stay there.
I actually think that because, I have a really great relationship with my mum now that has also developed deeper from my own healing journey, of course. And, I think that she has always been very encouraging of me of this. I actually think that it was, interestingly enough, I think a lot of the friendships that I had in my 20s dropped away when I stepped into this particular path, because that resonance and relating wasn't quite there anymore. And, the path that I have gone on is very different to the one that they chose. And they're both perfect and amazing. Yeah. But the relating just wasn't there anymore. Yeah. And it was like you said, it was like, well, we know you as this. How are you now going to be that? Like, we know you as Kirsten on the podium. Like, how are you now going to be like, speaking on podcasts? Yes. So it's like, that was, I think, quite a, it was a break in that. And that actually is also part of the 6-line journey as well, I'm realizing as well. But, that I think has been one part. But I also think the belief that I've had to develop in myself has been something that has changed a lot. And it's had to keep increasing and increasing and increasing and increasing, because as you continue to move through seasons of life, and especially like business is like a constant, you're like at that personal development workshop I was at in that first weekend forever. It's like I haven't left the room, because I think that it's just this continual initiation into different versions of yourself, different levels of belief, different levels of relating, different levels of awareness, different levels of strategy, different ways of seeing the world. And so like everything has changed in my life. But I think that as a result of this year, I think that what is changing is still yet to be revealed. Like I feel like I'm still like in the kind of awkward teenager phase of the next level of my growth at the moment.
And it's constantly evolving, so you're constantly changing all the time. Like it's never, you think you have this big realization, it's amazing, and then next week there's another layer of that same realization, and it's like,
I think this is also where the personal development world has kind of led us astray, is because I think there has been a lot of promises of like, when you come and do this thing, you're going to rip that root out and you're never going to feel unworthy again. You're going to have unshakable whatever. And it's like, yes, and no. Exactly. Because, and this is what I think also human design has given me is, in our chart, when you open up your design, the open centers where you've got those white shapes in the diagram. They're actually our course load for this lifetime. So for me, one of my course loads is the heart center, which is all about worth and value. Wow. So it's not that I'm going to get to a point where I've arrived and I'm fully in my worth and my value. Like I have noticed, especially, with different spaces, you develop a certain level of, you do the work and you develop a certain level of worthiness and value in one aspect. And then you get introduced to a new layer of life. Then you're like, oh God, here we are. Yeah. And it can feel like square one, but it's not. It's just you're learning for this lifetime. And that has changed the relationship that I have with the journey for myself, but also the work that I do on myself, because rather than looking to fix a problem, I'm like, how can I support myself best in this journey?
Yeah.
Yes, and because as soon as you take the fixing the problem out of the equation, it immediately becomes
creates space.
Yeah,
totally. Like my worth and value is not something to be fixed. It's going to be an ongoing journey that I'm going to have, and what a beautiful journey to have to keep falling deeper in love with who I am. But that is that's a lifetime journey. It doesn't have a destination. Wow. But when I in these little open centers we have what's called the not self, and the not self is feeling unworthy and undervalued. So when I feel that lack of worth or being valued, I can catch that now and be like, okay, cool, that's the not self again. This is what I'm here to learn. It's like, okay, so what do I need to do to meet myself in that right now? How can I recognize my worth and value in this moment? And what needs to change as a result? Is there anything that needs to change based on what I'm observing? Like, why did this not self come up? Is there a boundary that needs to be set? Is there a conversation that needs to be had? is there something about how I'm offering my work into the world that's not allowing me to feel seen, and how can I adjust that? So it's this real beautiful experiment of just like, I call it the catch and release program. It's like you catch it and then you
let it
course
go.
correct and you just release it. It's not me. It literally says it's the not, it's like, it literally says it's the not self. So it's like those feelings are not me, but you know, I can understand as well why I received why that was such a big story for me, and why I had so much conditioning around it, is because it's literally my course load. So now I'm going about unraveling the conditioning that I had in that center, and you know, moving into a different state of relating with that center.
It's so amazing. I know Eckhart Tolle talks about the pain body, and I reckon that's the same thing. And like I do in the work that I do with young girls, it's called the mean girl.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's the thoughts, the negative thoughts that go on in our head that will stop us from, you know, and we keep it as basic loving ourselves, you know.
Well, where we're open in our design, the mind actually sees it as a problem to solve.
Yeah.
So that's where the not self comes from, and that's where those, like, you know, because we've had the experiences that create the hypercritical thoughts, like the mean girl, like you're talking about, because the brain is trying to make us fixed and defined in that center.
Yes.
And so because it's not, it's like, okay, there's a problem, we need to fix it. Yep. You're wrong. This is wrong. That's when we like feed into the not self rather than allow ourselves to have a compassioning relating with that space.
Because what I was hearing you say before is that that premise of having conversations with ourselves and asking questions of ourselves. But it's the pivotal point is, what kind of conversations are we having? What kind of questions are we asking? And if we're fixing the problem, if that's our approach, are we fixing it in a way that locks us in further? Or, you know, is it negative? Is a whole situation positive or negative? Are we loving ourselves in these conversations? Is it a fun conversation? Yeah. Or is it a like downtrodden, you know, you're no good conversation?
I think the main thing that I'm hearing is that you become the observer of all.
Oh yeah, and this is what I love. Well, human design, it's like it's just a fun, curious experiment, and that's what I love about it. Is it's not anything again that has a destination. It's very much like, you know, we can give you the language and the understanding of, you know, what it is, but then it's up to you to take that information and then go and play and experiment with it. And it's so interesting to even see how those layers of awareness come through, because you know, when you do have that kind of, you pick up on it in your own life, you know, that's where you can get curious and be like, oh, that's interesting, or like, oh, okay, that's something that I'd like to work on, that's something I'd like to change. But it kind of takes that pressure off. I think we have so much more self-acceptance when we understand our design, and we have more of a, you know, like I said, more of a curious, playful way of going about the work. And you know, even just like random little things that I've noticed, one of the aspects of my design is I've got something called the gator fix pattern. So it lacks a rhythm and routine until it doesn't, and I've noticed that play out in my life in so many fun, cool ways, like food, but even like food. But even like, you know, I have 2 bathrooms in my house, and I notice that I'll go through a cycle of using one bathroom and then a cycle of using another bathroom. Like where I do my rituals, I'll have like a spot, and then I'll have a spot, and then I'll have a spot, and it just keeps rotating. But the most fascinating one that I've just come into awareness with the last 2 weeks is with fitness. Is, you know, I've noticed that I do normally, I do like to change it up. But for example, like over 1.5 years ago, I signed up to do a pole dancing as my fitness. And I've been loving that. But then probably about a term ago, so about 8 to 10 weeks ago, I was like, I don't think I'm loving this in the same way that I was, but I'm going to keep going because I've committed to, you know, because they grade you and it's like levels. I'm like, I want to get to the next level. And so I kept pushing. But then in this term, I started to just get little niggly injuries. Like my hip was like popping out of place. My wrist was like sore the whole time. I couldn't get rid of it. Like there's nothing wrong with it. But it was like little things like that. My neck was crunchy, like so many things that, you know, I hadn't hurt myself, but my body was just like rejecting that cycle of fitness. And it was like, I was like, no, but I love this and I don't want to give it up, but also I'm not really loving it. And it was like, I could tell that it was like time to pack it away. And I'd had that thought and I pushed past it. And the same thing happened to me with the last workout that I had done before that, where I had done that for a few years and I'd really like stuck with that as well. And the same thing happened. My body started to reject it. So now I know that that's also one of the ways that I can tell when I've gone past a cycle, is like my body can actually like reject that cycle of what I'm in.
I love that. That's so powerful for us.
Well, it's my signal. I've ignored the signal. It's like you've gone past the red light.
The prickles coming up. And is that? Do you think there's an aspect of think it's probably obvious, but of learning, like once you've learned something and you've almost had a level of mastery, it's like, okay, time for what's next kind of thing. Is that part of that cycle?
Yeah, and I think, you know, in human design, we all have what's known as a not self and signature in terms of our overall theme, and they're two kind of emotional signposts that tell us whether we're, you know, in alignment with our design or out of alignment with our design. And so, you know, for a manifestor, it's anger and peace. For the generators and manifesting generators, it's frustration and satisfaction. For the projectors, it's bitterness and also success. And then for the reflectors, it's disappointment and surprise. So these are kind of like
generator.
Yeah. So,
really? But I think most people are.
There's a big
like
portion.
70% or something.
70% are generators and mani-gens, so you guys kind of split off into about 33, 35.
I have to show you my chart afterwards.
Yes,
I have no
please
idea
do.
what I'm looking
Yes.
at. You've forgotten.
Yeah, but you know, I think that even just understanding that kind of gives us permission slip, because, you know, say for example, if you were a mani-gen and you know you are multi-passionate, multi-interested, and you kind of like, I call you guys the cosmic hummingbirds. You float around into different things and sample different things. But if you kind of stuck at one thing for too long, that frustration would start to build. And so I think this is where we can start to notice things and start to give ourselves permission to release ourselves from these cycles, because there is so much dogma in society of how we should be and whether we should stick things out and see things all the way through and be showing up on socials every day. And there's so many rules that aren't always for us. Exactly. Yes, literally.
Someone who came on, I can't remember now who it was, said about, just because I started something doesn't mean I have to finish it.
No.
Because what is finishing it?
We've got to let ourselves off
the hook,
don't we?
And, you know, for example, with the mani-gens, you guys pick things up really quickly, but you also pick up what you need.
Yeah.
And you might, like, exactly like if we think about, again, the hummingbird, if we just said you have to just have this flower, like there'd be no cross-pollination, like nothing's happening, like, you know what I mean? So it's like, that's actually one of your gifts, is to sample this one, sample that one, and then you weave together the innovation from what you pull together, the threads. But that's your gift. If we're holding you hostage in something that's not your gift, then you can't contribute your gift to the world. And, you know, manifestors, we're best at initiating. Like, generators have a level of sustainability and mastery. You know, projectors are here for their capacity to see. And I say that reflectors are like the cosmic HR department. They're these really beautiful, fair and equitable guides. But it's like, we all work in perfect symbiosis. But we all work in perfect symbiosis. But only if we're allowed and give ourselves the permission to actually be in our own genius and bring that to the world.
And isn't it just a beautiful thing to accept being in our own genius?
Yeah.
Wow, that's a statement
it's
that
so
kind of
beautiful.
like...
Oh, you know what? I just had a thought. We're going to have to get Kirsten on again just to do a podcast on human design.
Yeah.
So people can understand. I mean, we're going to flow people to you. Because you do readings and stuff, don't you?
I do, yes.
Yeah. Which I think
is
just so...
I think
it's so interesting.
You have to wait because you already got yours.
But I think it would be worthwhile, because I feel like human design is becoming one of those...
Oh, it's a massive
really
tool of these times.
Interesting, curious things.
Yeah. So many concepts and creating so much clarity.
Yeah. Well, I say it's like astrology on crack.
Yes.
That's perfect.
But I think the reason that it's quite resonant for people, I think, is because it actually really works with the physical 3D human, like the actual physical body.
Beautiful.
And also that esoteric soul purpose, soul gift. So when it blends together, like, people can understand, you know, oh, this is how I experience stress in my body, which is something that we all relate to.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, then when we're kind of thinking about our soul path and gifts, that gives us something to look towards. But I think, you know, sometimes when we're looking at, you know, just astrology, that's when we're just kind of mainly looking at the purpose, soul path kind of things that are kind of happening, which are also really important. But sometimes I think it is also helpful, and why people really resonate and get such an immediacy with human design is because it really does speak to the human and the soul at the same time.
Perfect.
You kind of feel it in your cells, actually, like when you're talking about different concepts.
Yeah,
it's there's a resonancy.
So back to you, my love.
Yes.
What do you do now to support yourself? To support your journey, like, you know, your personal self? Yeah.
So quite a few things. One of the things that I just started doing, obviously, because I'm as a manifestor, you know, my signature is peace. And one of the things that I kind of just clicked into my mind this week to do was to start asking myself, will this bring me peace? What will bring me peace? And so to kind of start to course correct my decisions to bring me even closer into that and recognizing that, because I think it's really sometimes easy to overlook and kind of do the things that you know should be doing on autopilot sometimes. And so just having that little awareness piece now with that question is something that I'm bringing in intentionally more.
Beautiful.
And the other thing that I do a lot of is, like I said, those somatic practices. So breath work, movement, embodiment, especially this year, like that has been my anchor point to really support myself. I do a lot of journaling and intention setting as well. And I spend time in nature. Like I love just going for a walk with my little dog and like going and having a little ball game together and just spending time in contemplation. They're sort of the main things that I do. And, you know, reading and drawing healthy sources of inspiration for myself as well. I think one of the things that I see a lot, especially in, you know, women who are, you know, on an entrepreneurial path or, you know, have big ambitions and dreams, is we compare ourselves a lot. And I think that comparison comes through unhealthy sources of consumption. And so what I find really inspiring that really helps, you know, me in so many different ways is looking for healthy sources of inspiration. And for me, I love, you know, I don't know if you've ever heard of the platform Masterclass. It's kind of like Netflix, but they just do classes with particular experts and like experts in all, like, you know.
Has it been around like forever?
Yes,
I have heard of it. Yes. You
know, things like that where, like, you know, I will, you know, even watch like Lewis Hamilton and give his, you know, his masterclass and stuff, even though like I'm not interested in car racing at all. But I love seeing people at the top of their craft speak about their knowledge and their perspective from all walks of life, and that really inspires me. And, you know, I think that, you know, I say that, you know, we're all icons and legends, and so I think that I love seeing that because it gives me inspiration of how I can actually then infuse those teachings or the inspiration that I've received from that into my work. You know, I had like last year I just did this fun little like pop-up Instagram exhibition called the Icons, Inspirations and Innovators. Cool. And, you know, I did lots of like breakdowns of, you know, different high profile people's, you know, designs and different things like that, and kind of spoke into that theme for the month. But that actually came from watching The Evolution of Hip Hop on Netflix. So like I love
so cool.
but I love kind of playing, like that's actually one kind of random way that I support myself is actually, you know, looking at different people from different professions and seeing how they've developed their craft. Like even in that Evolution of Hip Hop, one of the guys there invented scratching, and I'm like, wow, I never even thought of that. Like, you know, I'm like, oh, you just kind of take these things for granted. But I'm like, well, how did you, like, what was the thought process behind that? And I love seeing how people have gotten where they are in their journey. And so that's something that I also do to support myself, is kind of like look higher, because I think we can look very narrow. We can quite often look at like what other people in our industry are doing and what other people in our age bracket are doing, and I think that it's like, go bigger than that. Look at what people in 20 years time that you aspire to be like are doing and how they got there, and you know, allow that to drive you forward instead.
That's beautiful.
It's so beautiful. And it's I think it's what we've been, the thread of this podcast really has been about is the you know, first of all, be curious about everything. And have a beautiful balance of everything. Like you don't have to be one certain way.
Expansiveness.
It's like grab a bit of everything.
Totally.
I love that. That's so cool. So beautiful.
And it's amazing, again, like how, like you were saying about the different about Lewis and hip hop, those people, different things they say. It's that thread of, I've thought that, or I've kind of, like, that kind of feels like me, or, you know, there's little identification pieces in there that, as you say, elevate yourself up in your own thoughts around yourself.
And also it's really cool to see that there is no one way to success, right? Like even when you look at like Jay-Z, like he never writes a rhyme down. Like he doesn't carry a pen, like he doesn't write anything down, but he just goes in and he says it and he'll remember it once he says it. Whereas like, you know, someone like Tupac like wrote everything down, took a notebook with them everywhere. And so I love like seeing things like that, because we really can see that there is no one way to do things. There's no one way to greatness. It's just like what works for you. And I think that you know, I spent so much of my life trying to be someone else. And so I think, you know, now it's just like, how me can I be?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that, you know, I even
How
on,
me
yeah.
Oh my God, that's so beautiful.
And, you know, I think that, you know, I think actually our purpose is to be all of us, because, you know, I think we get so stuck up on like, what's this one thing we should be doing, you know, like we're J.K. Rowling and we've got to get our Harry Potter out, you know, it's like, you know, it's like, but we're not, you know, we're not one-dimensional beings. We're not a one-trick pony. We don't just have one thing we're meant to do. And I think that when we kind of then reshape the relationship with purpose to being all of us, you know, I then say we're kind of like an instrument of purpose, and we're just adding our harmony to the collective. And, you know, we don't need 8 billion lead singers. Like, we need the whole band. And so it's like, learn what your instrument is and learn your sound and bring that into the world with everything you've got. And don't leave the music within you. Like, let that music come to life in the way that you're here to bring it, because we all have the ability to inspire and impact each other. But we can only do that when we're really truly being ourselves. And so I think that actually that is the purpose, because then even if you're having a conversation at the coffee shop with your barista, that's you on purpose if you're being all of you. Exactly. But it's like, then if you're creating something, if you're in your job, if you're in your relationship, like all of that is on purpose when you're coming from it from the seat of being who you are.
And just on that note too, you know, what was coming in for me just then is about backing others to do the same. You know, not being the girl that might be pissed off because the friend's doing something and she's a little bit jealous or whatever. It's like, no, that thread has finished. You know, that doesn't exist anymore.
And that's actually what I find as a really cool knock-on effect to human design is the first layer is we learn to love ourselves. Then when we learn how cool and unique we are, we then start to encourage other people to do the same. We start to have a love of others and their process. And that's why I'm always like, I need to see your chart. Like, as soon as I meet new people, because I'm like, how can I support you to be your best? And like, you know, I know that, say, for example, if like as an emotional authority, I need time to ride my wave. Whereas, you know, a sacral authority, they make their decision by trusting their gut. So I know if I have a sacral gut friend, I'm like, okay, let me ask you a yes, no question to help you clarify this. But it's like, I'm not then, you know, being like, take your time, you need time. Like, I'm not pushing my decision-making process onto them. I'm encouraging them to do what's right for them. So there's this kind of then beautiful love of others. And, you know, it's so fascinating because, you know, even people who used to, you know, trigger me in certain aspects, you know, years ago, now I understand it's because they had certain aspects of my design, you know, defined heart or something like that. And so now I'm like, oh, how cool. Like, and I actually then really enjoy, you know, even people that maybe I didn't resonate with before, because I really see them as like this beautiful, you know, oh wow, you're in the full expression of who you are, and that's so cool. And so then I'm way more like encouraging and accepting of everyone else's processes. And that's obviously also, you know, helped me with my clients, because my, you know, the way that I support my clients is so tailored and unique to what they need based on their design. But then I think also, like, once we've got a love of self, a love of others, it really gives us this beautiful third layer, which is a love and trust of life. And I think that there's just such a beautiful, you know, symphony and harmony that kind of comes through in that 3-tiered process where we do really fall in love with ourselves. We really revere and respect others for who they are. And then it kind of gives us this, you know, beautiful expansiveness to all the little puzzle pieces that we're all here to play.
And that's where, like, that word namaste and mahalo, I mean, I see the beauty in you. Those, we don't have a word in English, but you know, namaste is used all the time, but that's literally what it is. I see the light in you, you know, and what you're just explaining. And if we had that concept brought to us as young people, how
so
incredible
powerful
is that, just in the space that it creates around our relationships and interactions.
Totally. And, you know, I'm constantly in people's DMs being like, oh my God, amazing defined ajna moment. Oh, totally getting ego authority. Like, I'm constantly just like egging people on to be more in their design. Once I know their chart, I'm always in people's DMs being like, oh my God, just totally witnessing your ego authority and loving it. Like, it's like always like celebrating people when I can see them in their design. It's just it's such a fascinating, cool thing to have that, you know, understanding of this, you know, drawing on a piece of paper and seeing how that comes through in their life. But, you know, even what you were just saying before about, you know, having access to that earlier, like, you know, kids are already living their design.
Yeah.
And so this is a fabulous parenting tool as well, because you can really just individually parent and support them to remain in their design.
Yes.
Like they're born in their design before the conditioning comes into play. So it's like, encourage them to stay in it, and then they don't need to do all the work we have done to
well, they don't have to unlearn as much.
to unlearn and then be themselves. They're already themselves. Let them be themselves. Yeah,
I love that. Just on everything you've just said was so beautiful, but it is a complete reflection of your space too. You know, outside of the human, I don't know nothing about human design, but it's a complete reflection of you and the space that you've created within. That allows others to feel nothing in your space, which is a good thing. It's really beautiful. It's really easy to just sit in your space. It's really beautiful.
And feel expansive in yourself.
And feel, you know, oh, I can do that. I want to be that. You know? Like really, really beautiful.
Well, if I had to say 2 words that I always used, like, about me from my clients, is permission slip. That's like, I honestly, and that's why I actually called my human design affirmation decks the permission slip decks. Because
so you have cards.
I have affirmation decks that are human design orientated and journals as well.
And they're you.
Yeah, so I created them.
Yay.
Yeah. So they are beautiful. Like, so they're little like affirmation hits.
Well.
So they're little affirmation hits of like your design. So you get this little permission slip every day to live your design. But that's what how my clients describe me, as a permission slip to be yourself.
Yes. I fucking agree with that. I have to use that word because it's just like
and I fucking love the way the music comes through and everything, because I love music, and for me it's like got so many aspects of why, and it's for everybody, but musicians, you know, people who write music, they literally are sharing themselves in every aspect. And last night we went, just as a little diversion, with a friend to see Russell Crowe, and he had this, who was so much fun, epic band, and he had this beautiful girl, Irish girl, come on before him, and oh my gosh, she was spunky. She was just so her songs were her writings, and she had saved up all this money from her work in her teens to travel the world, but alcoholism, she's 4.5 years clean now, at a young age, obviously was a big problem because of her lifestyle that she was living with her career. She saved all the money, used all the money she'd saved to go into rehab, and that was her, what we would call her Awaken. I want to get her on, but she was diagnosed she said she learned so much about herself, literally, like discovered she was bipolar, a lesbian, and neurodiversity was a huge discovery journey, and how she kind of tried to fit in, you know, fighting against this, and what you were describing before of, like, it's almost like you wonder whether bipolarism and split personality and all these kind of mental illnesses come because we're fighting against who we truly are. You know, we're so structured in and living within constructs,
someone's expectations,
expectations, and yet this recognition of human design would liberate so much.
Well, I've definitely noticed a huge thing with, you know, definitely like stress and anxiety and different things, you know, can really be pinpointed quite a lot in our design. And, you know, there are certain, I guess, like energetic root causes to things that we can sort of give ourselves support tools and awareness of how to manage that with understanding our design as well.
So if anyone's listening that actually feels like they look, I'm encouraging anyone that actually just wants to find out who they really are.
Should be a 101
and who they can be.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Last question.
Yes.
Well, have we I always come back to this one. What have you had to give up, people or things? I guess, have we already answered that? Like,
we talked about that. She said relationships and friendships.
Definitely, I think, you know, and sometimes with each phase of growth, I think sometimes, relationships, definitely, you know, things, excuses, situations, so many things. But I think also one thing that we don't often realize we have to give up in that process is versions of ourselves.
Identity.
And there can actually be a grief process in letting go of versions of yourself. It's like almost like breaking up in a relationship because you're actually like letting go of a version of you that served you for a long time. And it's like, you know, like having that love and respect for that version of yourself, and having that empathy for all the things they've gone through, all the things they've gotten you through, and also recognizing those parts of yourself that have to be let go and have to kind of die off to make space for that new version of yourself. And sometimes, that can be really great and liberating on the other side of that. But in the process, that metamorphosis, when we turn to goo, and we've got to let go of that structure that might have supported us for a long time, that can be really hard. And I don't think enough people talk about the grief of letting go of versions of yourself. And so that's probably been one of the more challenging parts, actually, is just letting go of versions of myself that have served me for a long time, to create space for the new to come through.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's powerful. That's so true. And I think that's a phase that a lot of people are going through right now.
We've definitely, this year, I think, has been a really big collective transition for many people on so many aspects. I've seen people let go of old business models, so many breakups, partner breakups, friendship breakups, so many things that have been going on at the moment. I actually did a free 3-day event a little while ago called Metamorphosis as well, kind of walking people through that transformation process, because there really is that kind of 3-part process with that transitional piece, which is really, like I said, like letting go and surrendering to what is breaking down to create the new structure, and then stabilizing in that new structure, and then finding strength in your wings, your new wings, to be able to fly. But I think, what we've kind of all been in is kind of this little dark room this year, where there's been we've been planted and we're kind of finding our way to the surface of this sort of new phase of life. But, one of the things I shared in my workshop a couple of weeks ago is, quite often development happens in the dark. And so, if you do feel lost, or you do feel unclear, or you're not sure where you're going, or you're not sure who you are, you're planted, not buried. Development really does happen. When we think of it, when we think of it, like I said, the metamorphosis, the caterpillar goes into a little dark cocoon to come out the other side as the butterfly. The seed is planted in the dark soil before it cracks out into, the beautiful plant that we see. Even if we think about traditional film, that is developed in the dark. So there's quite often when we're in these stages of growth, I said, to the girls a couple of weeks ago in a workshop as well, when we were younger, we had like physical growing pains, right? And now as adults, we have emotional growing pains.
Absolutely.
And so sometimes there is that kind of like murky middle part where we're not really sure, we're not really clear, and that's okay. I think that gets to be okay too. We don't always need to be 100% clear and certain of where we're going. We just have to take that next step. And, the caterpillar doesn't know it's going to turn into a butterfly. But it still surrenders to the process of turning into goo.
It just intrinsically knows when it's eaten enough. And it just starts spinning that cocoon.
It just trusts the process.
And so we kind of have to trust the unclear process of our own growth too sometimes.
Oh, I love that.
I feel that in my
Yes, I love that. Wow, amazing podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This is beautiful.
I've got one more question.
Okay, amazing. Yes.
You go.
I was thanking you already.
How
do you see the world now through Kirsten's eyes? Where do you think we're going or headed?
I think I'm a very optimistic person. I think that the world could be falling down around us, and I'm like, but we're gonna find a way. So I feel like I am still really overall optimistic. I think that we are definitely probably in one of the most interesting times in humanity right now. And I've been asked this in the past, where people would be like, what era of humanity would you have absolutely loved to be in? And I'm like, now. Now is definitely the most exciting and pivotal time, even though it's very exhausting as well at the moment, and very challenging and very hard. I think that this is probably one of the most important tipping points in the human evolution. And I think what a privilege to be here for that time as well. And also, what a crazy decision to have come here in this time as well. I'm often like, okay, soul, you must have known something I didn't. You've chosen to come here. You must know the plot, how the plot turns out. Come on. But also, we are entering a time where we actually don't have a blueprint anymore. And I think this is why there's so much uncertainty and unclarity, especially for those, like you said, who are kind of in the rooms, leading the charge, leading the light. Like, we don't have a guideline for this. Like, we are flying in blind. And so I think that, yes, it is very challenging. It's very interesting. It's all the things. But I think ultimately, you know, I think we see it all the time in like the hero's journey in movies, right? Good always prevails. And so that's really my belief, is that, you know, people are inherently good. And although we are shown a lot of narrative that says otherwise, I think that at the core, you know, we are inherently good. We are inherently here for each other. And I think that humanity, you know, has so much possibility and potential that we haven't untapped yet. So I think that, you know, the more people that awaken to themselves, the more that the scales will tip towards that really beautiful possible outcome. Because, you know, I do think that we can create a sort of utopia here. Like, that's, you know, I think where we could potentially go, but it is going to take a lot of work, and it's going to take a lot of people standing in their truth and having a voice for the things that matter to them.
It's so much in what you're just saying. It reminds me of when you were talking about the breath work before, because with the voice, it's what you mentioned then about the voice, why I feel like the breath work is just, you know, so big at the moment, because in the breath is so much potential, and it's a life force in itself, isn't it? It's an activator in our systems. And I am one of the most tone deaf singers you can ever imagine. It's shocking. I
think my mum would give you a run for your money. I'm constantly like, just let her sing, Kirsten. Like,
that's true love. But I feel there's so much empowerment in breath work to be able to sing. And I say better, not in a way that any, you know, singing, you should be better than what you can sing, but to enjoy singing to what you feel that you are singing. And in that liberation of the voice, like I've been doing a bit of chanting lately, and I just feel so much resonancy in my body because of the chanting and what that creates in my body. And singing is the same, how it creates a frequency and things. And I think anything we can do at this time to strengthen our voices is a really powerful contributor to that utopia that you're saying, that new earth that is coming through and standing in unity.
And I think, you know, that really comes from a resource nervous system as well. You know, that's where the strength of the voice comes from, is the ability to feel safe within ourselves to share it. And I think that really comes through that consistent resourcing work. So like, above all else right now, I think that, you know, nervous system toning and kind of strengthening that trust that we have within ourselves is the most important work that we can do right now, because, you know, the world is changing rapidly, constantly, every single day. And, you know, if we're attaching our identity and sense of self or stability to the things outside of ourselves that are shifting so rapidly, that's when we can feel so unstable within as well. So I think that's definitely a really important piece. But, you know, I also think just challenging the way that things are done, you know, even if they work for everybody else but they don't feel right for you, like, challenge the way that it's done. You know, we're not here to do things in one way. And, you know, society wants us to be in a box. Society wants us to conform. Society wants us to be homogenized. That's how the system works. And it's like, fuck it. Like, you know, the more of us that are individual in nature, the more closer we're going to get to a more optimized world. And that sounds kind of counterintuitive. It's like, oh, if we're more individual, like, rather than like collective focus. But that's what I said. We are an instrument, and we can't add our unique sound to create that harmony when we're trying to play someone else's instrument.
Like, my son said something funny the other day. He said, I just want to move out onto some land, I want to have some chickens, and I want to drink unpasteurised milk. And I said, but you don't do dairy. And he said, I just want it to be unpasteurised. I don't get what he was saying, and what you're saying about homogenise. It's like, you know,
I feel like that urge to just flee to the mountains is really strong in us all right now. But,
no,
you know,
it is. I'm feeling it too, but it's like, no.
Yeah, we've got to stay in the room.
True. It is like you said, stay in the room. Stay in the room.
And part of me is like, you know, because obviously I'm in this on the roof part of my cycle as well, you know, in that 6-line journey I was speaking about, and that is quite a detached, sort of aloof time in life. And so sometimes I'm like, oh man, maybe if I hadn't have spent so much money on dresses and partying in my 20s, I could literally be like out in the mountains somewhere. Like, it's like, The one piece of advice I'd have for like my 20-year-old self is like, yes, have all the experiences, but like maybe don't buy the $500 dress. Maybe just buy the like $20 one.
Yes, absolutely.
But then it was fun wearing it and having a good time.
Oh yeah, and ruining it in one go because you're like falling off a bench or something.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
You seriously have blown my mind today.
Yes.
I'm literally mind blown. And loved every minute of being in your space.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to put all of your details at the bottom of the podcast.
Beautiful.
If anyone wants to have their chart drawn. Is that how you say it? Drawn?
So they can go to my website. There's actually, if you're curious, you don't know anything about human design, there is a little tab at the top called human design. The first thing in there says get your free chart. So you can actually just like pull your chart from my website. And then if you want a little bit and you're a little bit curious, there's actually just like a little $35 program where you can just get the basics.
Unreal.
And then if you want to, you can dive into a reading, which is kind of the next phase on from that, where we kind of take some of the more generic advice and give you that tailored one-on-one support.
I feel like there'll be a lot of activation just from conversations
I do
with you
too.
today. And it's definitely a powerful tool, to, especially the way that you're sharing it. Obviously, you just resonate with it so deeply. Because the way you've alliterated the concepts that are involved with human design, just as we've already said, it's so activating in just the conversation that we've had today. You feel it, and
Absolutely.
it just takes that weight off your shoulders straight away, which is so much fun.
I think what we'll do...
I'm going to stop talking. I know.
It's 11.
I'm
going to run out.
Of battery, we're going to get Kirsten back.
Yes, we're going to try and twist her arm to come back.
You don't need to twist it, I'll be back.
Thank you so much. So listeners, I know that you will love hearing more about this, and we can't wait to have her back on. But thank you so much for joining us today on Girl Awakening.
Yes,
thank you for having me. It's been beautiful.
Much joy.
Thank you for listening, and remember, all links to our guest are in the notes. Leave us a comment here or message us on Instagram how our guest today connected with you, or perhaps something you wish to share. A special thank you to the blissful Ksenia Luki for our theme song. Joe and I will be with you next week.
Bye.
Ciao.
She teaches me lessons, and boy does she sing. Her voice sways like a hummingbird, flies like a shooting star. She whispers your